Hello and welcome to Real Life Faith, episode 17. My name is Chris, and if you aren't familiar with Real Life Faith, this is a ministry of Fairview Church in Englewood, Ohio. And this whole thing is about discipleship. It's about learning what the Bible says and figuring out how what the Bible says forms our life today. And if you haven't been a part of this, there's a whole series of these. This is episode 17. Feel free to go back on our page, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. You can go back and find the previous episodes. On YouTube, I have put together a playlist. So they're all kind of housed together in one place. If you go find that playlist, you can go through and see what that's all about. But if you, sometimes I feel like faith is one of those things, the Christian faith anyway, is one of those things that we sort of understand, maybe we culturally understand it, and what this podcast is about is trying to go a little bit deeper in that. Now, sometimes I struggle with how deep we can't go for the sake of time, but this is a start. If you're just trying to figure those things out and just trying to work through the things as far as your Christian faith goes, this is a great place to try to find that. If I can say it's great, that seems a little egotistical for me to say that out loud, but we're working through a book that it's called Banding Together, and if you would like to receive one of those books, let me grab mine. If you would like to receive one of these, it's just a very simple little notebook, and you are kind of like the co-author in this, where you get to go through and do little updates and entries based on the reading that is occurring at that time. You kind of get to do that yourself. You get to add to this book, and I'm going to go through here in a little bit and go through like kind of day to day what the readings are, and you'll see what it kind of looks like if you aren't familiar with it. But if you'd like one of these books, feel free to let us know. You can text in, and we can get you one of these books, and you can text in at 937-265-2218, and we'll send you one of these. So please feel free to do that. But one of the things we like to do every week to stay consistent and have a method to what we're doing is just to ask a few questions. These are just for you to answer yourself, and just kind of like a self-accountability thing. Now, ideally, if you want to get one of these books and maybe you're feeling like you would like to start a group of your own somewhere, let me know that. We can help you achieve that. But some of these books, some of these questions here are good to ask in a group where there are other people that you can interact with. This feels kind of one-sided sometimes. I feel like I'm talking to a camera and nobody's responding, but that's okay. You can do this on your own pace too. That's the other nice thing about doing it in video form. You can hit pause and think about these things. So here's the first few questions. How many days this week did you read the Bible? And how did you hear God speak this week? And you may be saying, I don't think I heard God speak at all. That's something to put to prayer and something to think about. And if you are questioning that, you can send a message to that number I put up earlier and say, I'm not sure I hear from God, and I would like to hear from God. Can you help me understand that? And we might be able to walk through some things together, but I believe God speaks to a lot of us. It's just we're not always hearing Him. And so, how did God speak to you through the journal? And there are questions that we're going to get to, and you can share a journal entry if you want to down in the comments below, and let us know what it spoke to you and how it spoke to you. And the third question: did you have any questions from your reading? I mean, it's okay to ask questions. It's totally okay to do that. Don't ever feel like you can't ask questions about what's in the Bible, because that's how we get our answers. So this week's reading is all found towards the end of Genesis, and this is what this week, this whole rest of this video is going to be about these chapters in Genesis. And if you want to screenshot that and come back to this video, you can do that. At the end of this video, I will also show you what the reading plan is for next week's episode, which would be episode 18. This is episode 17, and this one is a little bit late, by the way. I do have to apologize. It's been a rather busy month, and it's just kind of, I'll just be honest. Let's just be transparent about things. I was worn out last Monday, and I just couldn't, in good faith, do this podcast and not bring my best to it. And so I do apologize. This is rather late in the week when I'm getting this out, but I try to do this every Monday by 8:30, and I'm going to continue to try to do that. And but this is episode 17, a little bit late, but we're getting it there. So here's the first day of our reading plan was from from Genesis 39, and this is Joseph speaking. He's in the Pharaoh's house. He's there, and Pharaoh's wife is kind of hitting on him, and she's wanting him to kind of hook up, if you will. And he says to her as his answer, "No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" Now, what I take from this, Joseph had standards. Joseph had his line in the sand. He knew the difference between right and wrong, and Pharaoh's wife was coming on to him, and he's like, you know what? No, I'm not going to do that thing. And I think there's something wonderful to take from that in, like, what are our standards? What are the things that we have set up as our standards? Are they following God's plan? Are they honoring God? And Joseph was unwilling to cross that line. And there's something to pray about in that, as far as like how we conduct our daily lives. And I think that's ever so important in today's world where everything's on the internet, and we see Christians and pastors failing in their moral tests, if you will. And I think there's a value to setting up a standard and saying, I am not going to do these things that go against God, and in Joseph's case, go against Pharaoh himself too. So I don't know. There's something in that. We could spend a whole episode talking about that, but we'll move on to the second day. Was Genesis 40 and 41. Now, I was looking at Genesis 40, verse 4. Now, when I'm looking at these things, I'm not saying this is the right answers. There are no right answers. It's just what speaks to you, and these are what speaks to me. And so the fourth verse in chapter 40 says, "The captain of the guard assigned them, the cupbearer and the chief baker, to Joseph, and he attended to them." Now, there's more to the story. You can never read a verse without the context of the entire chapter. And Joseph is getting thrown into jail because Pharaoh's wife was kind of doing her thing. And if you don't realize what's happening here, he had gotten upset with his cupbearer and his chief baker and thrown them into jail. Joseph was trusted with their care, trusted with caring for them while they're in prison. And I think that speaks highly that the captain of the guard recognized Joseph. Joseph wasn't allowing his situation and his circumstances to dictate his behavior. He could have gone, I'm sorry if I am sweating, it is so hot in here, but he was not allowing his circumstances to cause him to disconnect and go sit in the corner. The captain of the guard recognized that Joseph was a person that could be trusted, and so he assigned these to the chief baker and the cupbearer who had been thrown into jail. He had assigned them to him. And so I think that says something, that the chief guard saw Joseph, and maybe he recognized that Joseph wasn't being treated right by being there to begin with. Who knows? We don't know what the rest of the story is. It's not written in there for us. But obviously his conduct while he was in jail was even enough that he felt he could be trusted as a leader in that space. And so what I take from that, how do my circumstances determine my actions? How do I respond when negativity comes my way? Do I respond in a positive way, or do I allow my circumstances to dictate who I am in that situation? So that's a good question to ask, but we'll move on. That same day we had Genesis, I think this is Genesis 41, 9 through 12. And it says, "Then the cupbearer said to Pharaoh, 'Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servant, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man an interpretation of his dream. Now, the context of this, Pharaoh had had a dream, and he didn't understand it, and nobody could figure it out. And this guy, the chief cupbearer, remembered Joseph in jail. Now, he's still in the captain of the guard's house. He's still there. He's still being kept away. But he remembered him, and he brought him back up in the conversation to Pharaoh. I think there's a value there. I think there's a value there of when you're in a space of remembering those around you who also have gifts, of encouraging people, and saying to somebody, if you're in that conversation where you can lift somebody up and say, hey, this person is good at this, and this is what this person does. I try to do that in my work life, in my personal life, and I try to do that here in the life of Fairview Church, of like, hey, have you considered this person and their gifts? That's something I think is important to do to help other people understand the gifts that people around them have that they may not realize they have. And when those gifts come into play or could be of some value to like say, hey, here's this person over here. Instead of sometimes we want to grab that attention and grab that glory for ourselves, it's awesome to be able to say, hey, look at this person over there. Look at this person and what they bring to the table, and let's bring them in. To me, that's how the church should operate. We shouldn't be grabbing that attention for ourselves. But here, this is the next day. I don't know what day we're on. We're on day 3. This is Genesis 42. And what hit me, what struck me in this passage was verse 21. And they said to one another, surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. And that's why this distress has come on us. Now, this is the story of Joseph's brothers and how, they had thrown him in a hole, then they had sold him off as a slave. They had caused all these issues because they didn't like some of the things their brother was saying about his dreams that he had and what he foresaw in the future. And he was one of the youngest brothers, and he was talking about how his brothers were going to bow down before him someday. And they didn't like it. They didn't like Joseph. They didn't like that his dad had given him this coat of many colors and all this stuff. And so they are reflecting on their distress and how it was caused by their actions. Now, there are times in life where our actions create the situations we get ourselves into. And one thing I've told my sons over the years, bad decisions seem good at the time. And it's weighing those decisions and understanding, how is this decision going to affect me in the next 10 minutes, the next 10 days, the next 10 months, the next 10 years. And I think it's important that we think some of that stuff through, that when we act poorly, when we make poor decisions, how those decisions can cause us issues in the future. So that's one of those things that, sin can just cause all sorts of issues. Sin is bad enough in itself, but it can also come back and create issues for us later. So moving on to day 4, and if I go too fast at any point in all this, if I go too fast, you're always free to hit the pause button. I will not be offended. Of course, I won't know, but I do try to keep a pace going so these don't get too long and take too much of your time. But I hope you do spend time reflecting on these and that I don't go too fast for that. But this is day 4. This is from Genesis 43 and 44. And from chapter 43, I looked at verses 30 and 31. And this is Joseph. He says, deeply moved at the sight of his brother, Joseph hurried out and looked for a place to weep. Now, he was in a room where he was in front of them. You have to kind of picture the scene here. And he went into his private room and he wept there. After he had washed his face, he came out, controlling himself, and said, serve the food. Now, I'm telling you, this whole story of Joseph and his forgiveness for his brothers you could spend years processing that level of forgiveness. Like, they did him wrong, and he saw how God was using what they did to bring them forward to this time. And if it were me, I'm going to reveal my human side. If it were me and this had happened to me and I saw my brothers after they had done all that to me, I think I would be upset. But Joseph, in his wisdom, was not only was he not upset with them, he was so touched, he was crying, and he had to remove himself from the situation to get his stuff together. And I think it says so much about his heart and how he could have been angry. He could have been very vengeful. And a lot of us would agree he would have been totally justified in being like, you know what? I know what you guys did to me. I'm your little brother. You're going to jail. He could have done that. But that wasn't where he was at with that. So I just, gosh, so amazing. Something to really think about. But going on to that same day in Genesis 44, and this is verses 33 and 34. It says, "Now then, please let your servant remain here as my Lord's slave in place of the boy." This is one of Joseph's brothers speaking, by the way. "And let the boy return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that would come on my father." Now, what I take from this is they learned, his brothers learned, this is Joseph's brothers, they learned that their mistake caused their father a lot of grief and a lot of pain. And they could have stayed in that space of not caring. They could have stayed in the space of, I use the term, just being jerks about it. But here, all these years later, the request, if you read this in context, was that the youngest brother was to be left there in where Pharaoh was, and for all the brothers to go back and get their family, and you leave one of the brothers as like a like make sure they come back for him kind of thing. And one of the older brothers who had been involved with Joseph being put in the hole and being sold off to slavery said, no, we can't hurt our father like that. We can't have that much pain on our father again. And I think that's a brilliant reflection on how people change over time, how people learn, how people grow, and it's okay for us to do that. It's okay for us to change our perspectives as we learn and grow. So something beautiful there. Moving on to day 5. And this is Genesis 45 and 46 were our readings for that day. And this is Genesis 45, verse 4. "Then Joseph said to his brothers, 'Come close to me.' When they had done so, he said, 'I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you.'" What a perspective to be able to see that. Now, I'm sure in those few moments before Joseph got all of his words out, I'm sure his brothers there was some look of fear on their faces. I'm sure they were like seriously scared for what could possibly come next. And Joseph very quickly calmed them, and he said, "Do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves." Here he is being a true leader and a true, exhibiting forgiveness, exhibiting grace, and in an enormous way. I mean, they took years of his life away. And it's wonderful. It's a wonderful story that we are able to read this. And how do we incorporate that into our lives? How do we have those situations where we've been deeply hurt and we move from a place of hurt and anger to a place of grace and mercy? And I think it's modeled well for us here. Moving on to chapter 45, or chapter 46. This is 46, verse 3. And this is God speaking to Israel, speaking to Jacob. He says, "I am God, the God of your father." He said, "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there." This is God affirming that the nation of Israel will grow from this one man. And can you imagine being in that space where he was like, "I'm afraid to pick up everything and move." And God said, "I will be with you. I will be right there by your side." And I think there's something to be drawn from that in our own lives, of those times when we're afraid to take those actions of reaching out to God that, is this the direction you want me to go? And if you feel that sense of comfort, if you feel that voice that says, I am with you, go and do not hesitate. And as the story reflects, of course, we know that they took everything, brought everything together and picked up and moved on to Egypt. And once they get there, we get to Genesis 47. And this is 47:11. So Joseph settled his father and his brothers in Egypt and gave them property in the best part of the land, the district of Ramses, as Pharaoh directed. So this is more a part of that story of Joseph being used to prepare the way for Jacob and his sons to come to Egypt and to be protected and to be well cared for. And Joseph saw it. Joseph saw the whole big picture, and I think that's the thing we miss often, is not seeing the big picture. We react to a little fraction of the picture instead of seeing the whole picture. You know, that's my visualization of a pie chart, if you don't know what I'm doing there. But if you think of an overall situation as being a circle, and this little tiny sliver of the pie chart is the negative part, but you're able to see the bigger picture. And I think there's a value to that. And to do that, we have to practice at that. We have to sometimes pause ourselves and think, what's the bigger plan here? What's the bigger picture? So on our last day of our reading, day 7, it was Genesis 49. And Jacob called to his sons and said, gather around so I can tell you what will happen to you in the days to come. And you have to read Genesis 49 to understand the importance of that statement. But he speaks into all of his sons, and he speaks into how their lives are going to play out and things they're going to do and how they're going to conduct themselves. And that is something I've always practiced with my own sons, of like, this is what I see in you. These are the capabilities I see that you have. These are the gifts that are in you. And I think that's something important we should do for everybody around us, like encourage people in their gifts and their abilities. And I think there's a huge value to that. And even as I'm talking about it, it's something I've practiced a long time, but it's something I want to get even better at as I get older. So I think that only happens through practice. So that brings us through all of our podcasts. Oh, that's your homework, by the way, for this week. Practice that speaking into somebody's life. If you see a gift that somebody has, it could be the Walmart greeter who actually truly smiles when you walk in the door and says hello, or it could be somebody that's close to you that you're like, you know what, I appreciate this about you. And that's your homework for this week. Do that at least once or twice. So at the end of every podcast, we like to ask these questions, and these are just for you to answer. These are not like, Chris isn't coming down on you if you give the wrong answer to this. There are no wrong answers to these. These are just questions to ask yourself. So first question, how is it with your soul? How are things going? How does your soul feel? I'm going to be honest and transparent right now. I'm tired. That's how my soul is. It's just been a rough month or so, and my soul is tired, and I've been a little frustrated at that. So that's how we know the value of rest. Number 2, what are you celebrating? And please feel free to pause at any point in any of these questions. Where are you struggling or being tempted? Number 4, how has the Holy Spirit been speaking to you? And number 5, do you have any sin to confess? Number 6, have you been angry, fearful, or anxious, and why? And like we're talking about this story of Joseph. I mean, Joseph could have been angry. His brothers could have responded with greater fear. Obviously, they had some anxious thoughts, and his father had some anxious thoughts, but God spoke into those and worked through those. Number 7, do you need to reconcile with anyone? Joseph saw the need to reconcile with his brothers, and he saw how God was orchestrating that reconciliation. Do you need to reconcile with anyone? And how well are you loving those whom God has placed in your life? And you could make the argument that there's all sorts of people that are being placed in our life all the time. That Walmart greeter I was talking about, the person who prepares your food at BB Bop or, Chipotle, wherever you go. How well are you loving that person? And how well are you speaking life into them? I have done it a few times, and this is one of the fun things for me is if I see somebody, that they're on their, like say at Chipotle, they're on their 400th burrito of the day or however many they make, and you can just tell they are more focused on the burrito than they are the person in front of them giving the order. And not that I think that's bad or anything. I get it. If I was doing that every day, I could do that too. And I'll ask them something about themselves, and you can see them almost like stripping gear. Like not a single person has asked me about myself today. They're just worried about me making their burrito right. You could see that look on their face sometimes. And so next time, there's another homework assignment. Try that again, and try to speak life and love somebody that's in your life. So our last questions, who are you praying for this week and why? And that infers that, yes, you should be praying for somebody. And why are you praying for that person? Who are you praying that would surrender their life to Jesus? And who is someone that you could start a discipleship group like this with? Like I said, if you wanted to do something like that and you want to receive one of these books and you want to go through it and see if it's something you'd like to do with a few other people, let us know. You can text in at 937-265-2218 and we can send you one of those books. So that's it for episode 17. Episode 18, we will be going over these the reading plan where we'll finish up Genesis chapter 50, and day 2 is like a review day, and they'll give you that break in the book so you have time to just kind of look back in the book and is there anything that pops out to you that you want to process through again. And then we'll be heading on into the book of Exodus for the next few weeks, the next few podcasts. So that's about it for this episode of Real Life Faith, episode 17. Please subscribe if you're on YouTube, or follow this channel if you're on Facebook. You can follow us and you can get notifications of when these videos come up. And thank you for being a part of this one. Take care.